It is circa 1987. Disney Animation is struggling. We're in the middle of the Little Mermaid production. On one side, John Musker and Ron Clements, now animation legends, but at that time just struggling to finish their film. On the other, Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, the studio leadership with a reputation for shutting things down. And then there's musical director Howard Ashman, composing an entire animated film for the first time, and the unsung hero of this story.
There were a couple of key scenes that Howard Ashman rewrote later, where we had story issues that Michael Eisner had complained about, or Jeffrey, but particularly Michael had a few notes that were actually good notes. So Howard said, well, let me take a crack at those, because we were busy trying to keep animators going and everything. So Michael Eisner had the note when he saw the rough reel that Sebastian was very much the king's ally at the beginning and his emissary. And he was directed, you take care of that girl and keep an eye on her and don't let her get in trouble and all that. And of course, by the end of the movie, he's helping her and he's doing things that would be very contrary to the king. Michael Eisner thought we didn't have a clear enough spot where he went from being adversarial to helpful. Where was that transition? And in the kind of language that Michael and Jeffrey always used, I think his comment was, if you don't fix that, you don't have a movie. That was his comment. It's always black and white, often black and white with those guys. And so it was a little more shady because we had tried to make that transition, but it was a little murky and it was a little ill-defined. So Howard rewrote a couple of scenes, particularly the main scene he rewrote, and which we shortened a bit. We used his dialogue, was the scene after she washes up on the beach, now having human legs. And the crab is yelling at her, we're going to go straight back to that king. And don't you give me that Himalayan. You're going to do this. And you're going to be miserable for the rest of your life. And she gives him a very moony, sad, wistful look. He said, all right, I'll help you find that prince. What a soft shell I'm turning out to be. So that was Howard's scene. And that helped. And then he had some clearer things where the crab was her advocate now in the scene where she's going to sleep. He's saying, you've got to bat your eyes like this. You've got to pucker up your lips like this. Howard wrote that stuff, which was a more explicit thing, because I think maybe it was a little murkier in our version that he was now on her side and trying to move things along in that direction. So those were helpful things. And then the very end of the movie, Howard rewrote, which he argued with our ending, and it was a good writerly point he made, because we used to have when the prince was on the beach and Ariel was on the rock watching him wistfully at the very end, and the king is watching them. We had some versions maybe where they hardly said anything. And Howard comes from the world of theater. He's like, people talk. They don't just stand there, because we were more on the movie end, like people should talk less. So there was a little bit of a push-pull between us and Howard, because he's like, you don't have a dramatic thing and not have dialogue. So when we did have dialogue, then we gave the king a line where he said, that human saved my life, before he turns, Ariel gives her human legs. If he didn't intervene, I would be dead. And Howard's like, you've written the wrong ending for your movie. He said, you have a movie that's about a father-daughter relationship and a daughter wanting to get independence from her father. If you're doing a movie about prejudice, that's the ending for that movie. But this hasn't really been that movie.
It's her dream. You're not going to miss what the film's about. That's the central issue of the entire film. She wishes she were human. At the end, she will become human.
Right, and he was right. And so he wrote the scene. And what was great was he did what the best writing does, obviously, that you can use subtext and not be OTN, on the nose, and yet you still get it. He wrote the scene between Triton and the crab at the end where he says, she really does love him, doesn't she, Sebastian? And then Sebastian says, well, it's like I always say, children have to be free to lead their own lives. King said, you always say that? He said, hey. And then the king says, well, I guess there's just one problem left. And the crab says, what? And he says, how much I'm going to miss her. And then he turns her into a human. And so how much I'm going to miss her doesn't say it on the nose, but basically that says, I'm going to do something that changes my mind, tips the whole thing the other way, and yet doesn't say it explicitly. And then it's the action that says it, when he actually, there he goes, and he turns her. So that was a great bit of writing by Howard, I think, that really helped wrap up that father-daughter story in an emotional way. And it was a learning moment for us in terms of making sure your endings fit your beginnings. And I think Moana, we went through a slightly similar process where we struggled with the third act of the movie, and finally some things sort of fell into place in a way that I'm really happy with. It came from multiple sources from a writing point of view, including Lin-Manuel Miranda and Mark Mancina and Dave Pimentel and story writers. Different strands came together in a way that, yes, that's satisfying.
Animation is collaboration. That's the spirit behind the Write for Animation Academy. Our community is filled with passionate storytellers who want to learn together, write together, and support each other. Join us now at writeforanimation.com/academy. Who knows, you might just find your next creative partner. The link is down below. And speaking of musicians being heroes, watch this video to discover how Lin-Manuel Miranda was able to make you care for 13 family members and who knows how many background characters in a 4-minute 17-second song. Click here to discover all about it directly from Encanto director Gerard Bush and Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm Pietro, this is Write for Animation, and I'll see you there.